The American news media has collectively decided to ignore all of Donald Trump's threats of white supremacist violence and sedition. Now, if you believe that this is going to keep us safe from his schemes and machinations, or from what his legions of sycophants may do, you're basically are greatly mistaken. Now, apparently, the gatekeepers of the approved public discourse have convinced themselves that they are somehow serving the public interest by ignoring these escalating threats. In reality, these gatekeepers are doing exactly the opposite. Now, they are normalizing American fascism by minimizing its dangers. Now, in a moment when the news media as an institution, we need to sound the alarm, even more loudly about the threat to American democracy, safety, and security that was represented by Trumpism and the neo-fascist choice that has been made to mock or whitewash the imminent danger that we see. Now, one does not ignore an arsonist in the hope that he will stop burning down buildings. The same logic should apply to political arsonists as well. And did you know that last Saturday Donald Trump held a Klan slash hate rally in Selma, North Carolina? Now, if you believe that the mainstream news media, the answer is likely no. But here is what you might have missed. Um, as he has done repeatedly, Donald Trump summed up the demons of Jim Crow and the Confederacy. He may try to hide his hatred and bigotry by sharing a stage with black and brown people, and he may disingenuously employ the language of the civil rights movement. But Donald Trump is at his own core a white supremacist and racial authoritarian. Now, Donald Trump remains the de facto leader of the Repug Party. He won almost 75 million votes in 2020, significantly, which was more than what he had won in 2016. But even though the joke of electoral college put him in 2016 along with Russia, but anyway, and because the Repug voters enthusiastically agree with him and what he represents, which he doesn't represent anything, basically his stupidity is their stupidity. Trumpism and neo-fascism are more generally are both a symptom and a cause of an American political culture society, and that is deeply sick with multiple ailments. Like, it's basically filled with racism, misogyny, cruelty, and greed, anti-LGBTQ bigotry, um, fake religious fundamentalism, anti-intellectualism, an obsession with violence, and other antisocial and anti-human behaviors. The relationship between the leader between the fake leader and the sycophants, such as today's Repug Party, is deep and powerful. And Diane Roberts of the Florida Phoenix summarizes this unhealthy psychodynamic. Repugs are angry. The deranged white man syndrome has not yet been listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, but it's a matter of time before it gets put up in there. Seriously, these dumbasses and they're mostly male gendered persons. They're on a rampage of rage and loathing which cannot be healthy. Living in a constant tantrum must be exhausting for repugs. I suspect that somewhere in the deep recesses of their brain, they know what little peanut-sized brain they have. They know that while they may hold power at the moment, the world is going to change, and they can't fucking stand it. Let's hope they get serious help with their therapy. And this is a sick bunch of fucking people. And to the uninitiated, and to all those who have just become numb to it all, Trump's North Carolina Klan hate speech was an uninspired recitation of his personal grievances, the malignant narcissism that I've got to be the cleanest, and he claimed that he was the most honest human being, which he's not, and there is no fucking God. So, so with the victim fantasies mixed with now standard talking points about the big lie, the 2026 election on January 6th, parents' rights invaders at the U.S. Mexican border, supposed comment, and then birthism, and barbarism in Democrat-run major cities, and a sort of lies, both small and large, about Joe Biden and the Democrats. Now, what Trump fails to realize is that most of the crimes come from the repugs. So, but for those attuned to the poisonous gospel that is white supremacy in America, Trump's words and danger that they represent were very clear. As a matter of self-defense and survival, black and brown folks must be keenly aware of such words. Trump's cult sycophants and other members of the conservative movement and the larger white right also hear his words and understand their message clearly. For them, Trump's words are inspiration and aspiration, which they're neither. To many Americans that choose not to hear Trump's word of hate, it all feels so unseemly and uncomfortable. They truly believe that they have the luxury to ignore reality. And to many other Americans, they choose not to hear Trump and the white right's hate because it feels so unseemly and uncomfortable. They may be fence sitters in denial about the realities of American neo-fascism in this moment of crisis, or they may turn away because various forms of privileges. Um, now be it of race, class, gender, religion, or sexual orientation, it enables them to do so. Now, those who possess such privilege and other forms of unearthed advantages truly believe that they have the luxury to ignore reality until it is no longer possible to do so. Now, um, Trump's gospel of the hate Klan speech in Selma focused on three main points. He spoke about the heritage of the South and how it is supposedly being destroyed or deleted by the woke Democrats that he's talking about with their political correctness. Now here, now here, Trump is directly alluding to Confederate statues and other monuments, as well as the Confederate flag, originally erected to honor the white supremacist Southern secessionist traitors in their bloody, desperate struggle to keep Black Americans as slaves forever. Now, many or most such monuments were actually erected in the first decades of the 20th century, specifically to terrorize Black Americans, reminding them that they're supposed to be second-class citizens in their own country. Now, today's Repug Party embraces the lost cause ideology and the Confederacy as something noble and good, and that was visible in the Confederate flags that were seen at Selma, as well as those seen at the U.S. Capitol on January 6 of 2021. Those symbols cannot be salvaged or reclaimed. They represent a white supremacist insurrection against the very idea of multiracial democracy. It basically an example here of the rhetorical strategy known as narrative laundering. Donald Trump summoned up the Black freedom struggle and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause while defending his sycophants who attacked the Capitol on January 6. And this is the newest iteration of the big lie with its claims that these fascists are political prisoners, which they're not, who were entrapped by the Democrats and law enforcement agencies. Now, Trump echoed this lie that has become widespread among repugs. The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is somehow responsible for the violence of January 6th rather than Trump and his fellow sycophants. No, Nancy Pelosi had nothing to do with January 6th in the aspect of the violence that was committed. To use the language of the 14th Amendment, explicitly added to the Constitution to protect the civil rights of Black Americans after their centuries of enslavement and then hard-won freedom, it's basically a cheap tool for defending these fascists who are fighting to overthrow the multiracial democracy. It's perverse even by Trump standards. Now, also using the language of the 14th Amendment, adding to protect the civil rights of Black people who had won their freedom. It's to basically to defend fascists is perverse even by Trump standards here. But as he reliably done at all his recent political hate rallies, in Selma, Trump continued to incite political violence and terrorism against our current president, Joe Biden, the Democrats, and progressives more generally. He called the Democrats sick and radical politicians, which he's technically describing the Repug Party, claiming that they're destroying America, which technically, Trump, that's what you did. You destroyed America, along with other Repugs. Trump also claimed that the right-wing paramilitaries who were recently acquitted on charges of planning to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer as fellow victims of some non-existent Democratic Party conspiracy. But like other Republican fascists and their propagandists, Trump continued to fan the flames of the QAnon conspiracy theory and the larger right-wing moral panic around gender issues and critical race theory, claiming that the white children and the white American family are in physical and moral danger from the Democrats, which they're not. These threats are not implied, but such language is an encouragement to violence and other forms of the right-wing terrorism. As seen by the events of January 6th, such combustible language has real-world effects. Now, when the more right-wing violence inevitably occurs, the news media will, of course, engage in collective shock and surprise, expressing wide-eyed disbelief that such things could actually be happening here in America alone. Indeed, how could such things have happened? After seven or so years of a rising fascist threat, none of this should be a surprise for anyone who has paid even the slightest bit of attention to what's really going on. This is still a surprise to many of the country's pundits, opinion leaders, and others who are supposed to know better. and they say and it says far too much about their increasing their relevance in this interregnum of American history. Trump's Repug Party and the larger neo-fascist movement are unified around one goal, which is creating a 21st century version of American apartheid. This revolutionary campaign involves reversing the gains of the civil rights movement and black freedom struggle, and also undoing the victories of the women's rights, LGBTQ rights, labor and environmental movements, along with all other attempts to build a social democracy in which equal freedoms and rights are enjoyed by all Americans. The Democratic Party has shown itself to be largely ineffective, powerless, and incompetent in their response to the neo-fascist attacks on democracy. Now, this is part of a much larger pattern. Going back 50 years, the Republican Party and the conservative movement have won and kept power by leveraging the politics of the white racial resentment and grievance mongering, even though their policies are extremely unpopular with many of the public. In many ways, Trumpism, neo-fascism, and straightforward white identity politics are the next step in that political strategy. And what should the Democrats do? They need to speak clear and in direct terms about the dangers that the Republicans represent. Democrats also need to make clear to their voters and the larger public that Republicans and the Trump movement specifically view Democrats, progressives, black and brown people, the LGBTQ community, and other marginalized groups as enemies and an existential threat to the right-wing nightmare and version of America. The animus is not about mere disagreements about public policy, but it's a matter of polarization, partisanship, partisanship, or hyperbolic language. It is a direct threat of violence with the goal of eliminating the enemy in order to purify America. In even more plain speech, if you are not white and a man, a heterosexual, and a so-called Christian in today's Repug Party, the conservative movement, and the larger white right do not like you. They want you to fucking suffer. Republicans are masters at the personalization of grievance, and they will lie and distort reality and the fact to frighten their voters in order to win, maintain, and expand their political power and societal control. Democrats need to respond in kind by personalizing the dangers that Republicans, the conservative movement, and the larger right pose to the American people as a whole. This is a remarkably easy strategy. This is a remarkably easy strategy to implement. All it requires is for Democrats to tell the truth about the human misery that Republicans and conservatives have caused for years, and the much more misery that they will cause in the future. Yet, out of gross denial, or perhaps naive investment in normal political order that is dying and cannot be resurrected, the Democrats have not done that, and they likely never will. This will not even defeat. This is not even defeat, basically. It's surrender. And it's a pitiable sight and a moment when courage is required to save American democracy and society from the neo-fascist assault. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And also, if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of my YouTube channel. And just donating a few bucks a month can help the channel go a long way, and thanks for listening.